Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers Chris Godwin and Mike Evans both went over 1,000 yards last season. But which one should you be buying and which one should you be selling in your dynasty leagues? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, today we are talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into the 2023 season and which players you should be buying, selling, and holding as we get into the year. Let's start with your favorite buy, who is?
It's got to be Chris Godwin. So, spoiler alert, buying Chris Godwin, selling Mike Evans. Chris Godwin had 104 receptions last year in 15 games played, average 6.9 receptions per game. That is only behind three players, three pretty good wide receivers who you might have heard of: Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill. Those are the only players with a minimum of 10 games played to have averaged more receptions per game.
Yep.
Chris Godwin, he is consistent on a week-to-week basis because of that volume. What's probably most encouraging here is that, you don't necessarily have some stability at the quarterback position, I'd argue. So I'm going to roll with a guy that can produce on volume as opposed to that efficiency that sometimes has, helped bolster Mike Evans, even though, the catch rates have been low. He can make big plays that kind of make up for that. Chris Godwin, we don't have that issue. He has fantastic yards after the catch ability, which we were even able to see that in his return from a torn ACL last year. Had a hamstring issue upon return and still dominated this season. Like, if this is what he could do, post 104 receptions in his return from not just a torn ACL, but like a late torn ACL, I'm going to take Chris Godwin all day. And it feels like he's been in the league for about
Forever.
Literally forever. He's 27 years old. He just turned 27 years old. I just think he is really undervalued for what you get in terms of consistency and production.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things we can discuss here. First of all, I think it's fair to assume now that he's going to be a full year, year and a half removed from the ACL injury, that he's going to be more explosive. You mentioned the age. He's still going into the prime of his career. Like, this season should be one of the best seasons. And then you mentioned the hamstring injury. He got hurt in week 1, came back, I think it was in week 5. And from that point on, he averaged over 70 receiving yards per game. And that type of production is really, really good. And it's really reliable and it's bankable week to week. My issue with Chris Godwin is the price. He's still being drafted pretty high. He's being drafted as wide receiver 22. I like quite a few receivers behind him because I'm just worried about the overall volume. Like, we saw Tampa Bay throw the ball like crazy last year. And with a new offensive coordinator, with not Tom Brady under center, is the pie just going to get a lot smaller in the offense? That's my biggest concern.
I don't share that same concern because I think Chris Godwin is the centerpiece of this offense. And I think he's the most like Mike Evans. I'm going to need to count on Baker Mayfield's ability to deliver that ball. The way they utilize Chris Godwin, they're just getting the ball in his hands, and then we can see.
I do think he fits Baker
afterwards.
Mayfield better. Because I think obviously Godwin's going to play in the slot, right? And Baker's pretty good at throwing to slot receivers. I think that makes a lot of sense together.
The most success we ever saw from a wide receiver with Baker Mayfield was Jarvis Landry.
Yeah.
Averaged almost 12 fantasy points per game with Jarvis Landry, averaged almost 12 fantasy points per game with Baker
Mhm.
Mayfield, and we know Baker Mayfield struggled to produce fantasy assets. And I think the role fits for Chris Godwin. But Marcus, you mentioned the price. I'm actually kind of surprised that is a price that's non-negotiable for
Well,
you.
I'll say this morning I went to look at Chris Godwin's price because I haven't checked in on a while. So I wanted to see where he was being drafted among receivers because, frankly, I was going to kind of make him my buy. And I thought, oh, if I can get him around wide receiver 30, 32, I'm in. Wide receiver 22 feels expensive because these are the receivers that are going behind him in startup drafts. Jordan Addison. I'll take Jordan Addison all day. Terry McLaurin, Brandon Ayuk, Quentin Johnston, Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks. I'd rather have all those guys than Chris Godwin.
I think what you're banking on though is like any of those picks hitting, and I don't know that none of those picks feel like a guarantee. You know exactly what you are getting when
I
you
feel
draft.
pretty confident in Terry McLaurin, to be honest, because they're basically the same age. And I
Do you
know
think
that
Terry McLaurin has the same ceiling for fantasy that Chris Godwin does? Because I don't.
no, probably not.
And that's my tiebreaker right there. Like the ceiling, because like for as high as the ceiling has been for a player like Mike Evans, even Chris Godwin, he's had that similar ceiling because of the volume. And like again, I just don't see that changing anytime soon. All indications are that this is a team that is going to generate touches, get the ball in his hands, and then let him make plays after the catch, which we know he's incredibly talented at doing. That's what I'm banking on there. And I don't think, Terry McLaurin, excellent, excellent, excellent real life wide receiver. My issue comes when we're actually looking at the ceiling for fantasy, because I think, again, you're getting 27-year-old Chris Godwin, who's got a much
Yep.
higher ceiling. We know his ceiling is top 5. Like,
I don't know if anymore he has that just because of the quarterback situation. Let's run through some recent trades, Kate, because I want your thoughts here. According to Dynasty League Football, we've got quite a few. 108 in this year's draft for Chris Godwin straight up.
I'll take Chris Godwin.
Okay, Chris Godwin then for a 2024 second-round pick. I'm assuming you're taking Chris Godwin there as well.
Smash Chris Godwin.
A 2024 first-round pick for Chris Godwin.
Definitely, it depends on where that pick.
Let's assume it's mid to late.
I'll take Chris Godwin.
See, I think I would take the pick there. Dameon Pierce.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'll probably roll with Pierce, especially if I'm a running back needy team.
And the last one, Chris Godwin for a 2024 second-round pick in Gabe Davis.
Smash Chris Godwin.
See, I'll take Gabe Davis all there. So we just have a little bit of a differing opinion. I think you like the safety of Chris Godwin plus the potential ceiling. I'm just worried about that pie getting a little bit smaller. And Kate, I kind of like the next receiver that we're going to talk about, Mike Evans, who is a sell for you. We'll discuss that when we get back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet worth up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, you can bet on the NBA Finals, which start on Thursday night. I kind of like the Nuggets to maybe sweep. Sorry, Jimmy Butler. There's no better place to bet on all the NBA playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get a no-sweat first bet worth up to $2,500. That is FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. Every dayers on Monday's show, Kate and I are going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals and which players you should be buying from that offense now that DeAndre Hopkins is gone. So make sure you tune in for that. Kate, I want to ask you about your sell, who is Mike Evans, because, again, I think we're going to have a little bit of a different opinion here. Why are you selling Mike Evans?
Mike Evans, again, we talk about like reliability. You know what you're going to get with Mike Evans? You're going to get 1,000 receiving yards because he's never not had 1,000 receiving yards.
Yes.
But don't know, not often talked about stat, quote unquote. But the issue with Mike Evans, it literally comes down to the floor for fantasy football because it is quite low. And like the end of season ranks for Mike Evans, they always feel a little bit better because we know that we have these big, gigantic boom games. Mike Evans last season, not a sustainable fantasy asset in any stretch of the imagination. Finishes wide receiver 18, which like feels pretty fine, but he was literally a wide receiver 1 3 times last year.
Mhm.
He performed as a wide receiver 1 3 times. The bulk of his games came as a wide receiver 4 or worse. Almost 50% of his games just killed you. That's not sustainable on a week-to-week basis. And again, like we had a 30-point game against the Chiefs in week 4, a almost 50-point game week 17 against the Cardinals or against the Panthers.
Right?
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
Yeah.
Where he finishes a wide receiver 1, had 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's fantastic, but you can't bank on that week to week. In the ceiling, Marcus, it's great, but it's not worth the floor to me. And this is coming from somebody who, Mike Evans, one of my favorite NFL wide receivers, love to watch him play. But for fantasy, especially with the questions at quarterback, I'm not sure I'm looking to buy right now.
See, I am, and it's all because of the cost, right? You mentioned, just how consistent he's going to be 1,000 yards. Now it's going to be a little bit up and down week to week, especially now that they have Baker Mayfield. But to me, the difference in cost between Chris Godwin, again, going as wide receiver 22 and Mike Evans as wide receiver 38 is a little bit too big, right? And you can get, if you're in the league, and actually I'm in a couple of these where I just need wide receiver help, and I've got a team that's somewhat ready to win now that can definitely be competitive. You can get him for nothing, right? I just saw a trade on Dynasty League Football was Mike Evans for Elijah Moore, straight up. Like, come on now. Mike Evans for the 207 in a rookie draft. I just think he is such an easy player to acquire right now for nothing. And I think you're going to get wide receiver 3 production every single week with maybe a little bit more if the connection with Baker works out. I think I'm buying, Kate.
I think the pricing is right. And I guess theoretically that makes him a buy, but like he is very team dependent for me.
Do you
You
think
need to have a team that is rock solid, reliable on a week to week basis. You need assets if you're going to take this roller coaster that is going to be the Mike Evans roller coaster. You are very much going to need to have some safety in the rest of your roster. Like you need to have the perfect roster for Mike Evans to be the final piece.
Can I give you an example? I hate to use specific leagues, but I'll tell you a league where I literally traded for him yesterday. It's a start 3 receiver. You can start a receiver in a flex league. And my receivers were Cooper Kupp, Rashad Bateman, Cortland Sutton, and Alan Lazard. And obviously love Cooper Kupp, but the other 3 guys are just so underwhelming and inconsistent. So I sent a late second round pick in a rookie draft for Mike Evans, and I instantly feel so much better about my wide receiver core. I think that's the type of situation where you should go out and get Evans if you've got your anchor wide receiver, but you just kind of need somebody a little bit more reliable in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 spot.
In my oh so humble opinion, like your roster, yes, Cooper Kupp, great anchor, right? Like that is one of these players that week to week, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get target volume. You're going to have a really safe floor. But I still think you need some other, safety outside of Mike Evans. Like I think
Well, Alan Lazard, is it a safety option for you?
no, like
Thanks.
I think just generally speaking, like yes, Mike Evans, pair him with Cooper Kupp, like but it's still, I still think you need a little bit more from the rest of your guys. Marcus, the best two best seasons any wide receivers have had with Baker Mayfield throwing him the ball. Jarvis Landry in 2019, OBJ in 2019. Now, what do we think in turn, like, how do we compare these assets to what we can project in 2020? Because Jarvis Landry in that season, 2019, was the wide receiver 13 on the entire season. Didn't miss any games, so that helped him out a little bit. But meh.
I know it's the upside just isn't there that it used to be with Mike Evans, and especially with Baker Mayfield now, the double-digit touchdown potential is just gone, right?
OBJ, obviously, I think comps more for your Mike Evans, right?
Yeah, because he played on the outside. Yep,
wide receiver 26.
Yeah, and that's probably what you're thinking of getting, right? That's a high-end wide receiver 3, right? But you can get him for nothing. Again, on Dynasty League football right now, here's some recent trades. 211 for Mike Evans. Like that's you're talking about Cedric Tillman in that range, right?
I mean, Rice. That's you rolling the dice and hoping, the late round value works out there.
Here's another one. Mike Evans for DeAndre Hopkins, straight up.
I'll take DeAndre Hopkins there.
I'll take Mike Evans.
DeAndre
Hopkins doesn't have a team.
DeAndre, he's gonna have a team.
Yes.
He's gonna have a team, but like DeAndre Hopkins, I think regardless of landing spot, you know exactly what you're gonna get out of DeAndre Hopkins for now. You're gonna get production. Mike Evans, again, if we even copy and paste last season, he's going to hurt you in your lineups more often than not. And I don't think that changes. Like, sure, if we're going to say Baker Mayfield is an upgrade to even Tom Brady at his worst, I still don't think that's true.
All right. So again, we differ in opinions. That's okay. You're selling Mike Evans at wide receiver 38. I am buying because I think he's going to have a 1,000-yard season. You can get it really cheap. We'll see. I want to hear your Mike Evans trade, so please send them in to us. Okay, let's talk about this backfield for Tampa Bay and what you should do, because holy cow, it's a rough situation. We'll discuss that when we get back. Okay, let's talk about this backfield. Are you holding anybody here for Tampa Bay?
I'll hold Rachaad White, and honestly, it's not because he had a fantastic rookie season, was incredibly inefficient, as was the entire Bucs backfield. Like the injuries that this offensive line sustained last year didn't help anybody's case. Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette both averaged either 3.8 yards per attempt and 3.5 yards per attempt, respectively. Just some of the least efficient runners in this entire class. What is this scoring potential going to be like in this offense? I don't know, but
not good. I'll tell you,
it's not going to be good. But I do think, like, when you are looking at running backs with potential for volume, it's really hard to find a running back that costs less right now that is probably going to see the kind of volume that Rachaad White is going to see on a week-to-week basis, even if that is inefficient.
I am selling Rachaad White so hard right now. I can't. I looked up his price this morning on Dynasty League Football, where he's being drafted, and I was shocked. Do you know where he's at?
I see RB 18.
That is dumb. Look at some of the running backs that are going after him. Our guy Dameon Pierce is RB 20. Listen, we know Dameon Pierce is going to get a ton of work in Houston, and we know he's good. I don't know either of those things for Rachaad White. Explain that one to me.
I don't understand. I don't understand that evaluation.
I'll give you another one. Even further down, and I know you're not as high on this guy as I am, but Isaiah Pacheco is RB 27 on the best offense in football, and the only player there that's going to be blocking him from touches is Jerick McKinnon, who they just re-signed a couple weeks ago. Clyde Edwards-Helaire obviously isn't going to be a factor. I would just take Isaiah Pacheco over them. So if I can sell that, if I can trade them straight up, I would do that in a heartbeat.
I think it's fair. And again, like this comes down to a situation where I'm definitely not looking to acquire him. I will 100% sell if the price is right. But again,
You're
when
not
you're
just going to give
looking,
them away. Is
no, I'm
basically
not
what you're
going to
saying.
give him away.
Yeah.
I'm not in a desperate holding pattern to get him off my team as soon as possible. But again, like looking at potential for touches, Marcus, how many running backs in the league, barring any sort of health concerns, do you think have, potential for more touches this year than Rachaad White? Because I feel like the
Not
list
many.
isn't as in it. It's not very long, right? Like
I just worry so much about like Tampa Bay couldn't run the ball last year. The offensive line got worse, in my opinion. The quarterback situation got worse. It's just I envision in my brain like a lot of these games of like 19 touches for 72 yards and no touchdowns. Right.
I think you're going to have a general pretty safe floor because of those touch totals. But yeah, the ceiling's probably not super high.
Yep.
But
Unless this
again,
offense just completely outperforms expectations, which I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to just transition really quickly. One of the players that I want to buy from this offense is actually Baker Mayfield, who's
you are
going
insane. We do not see eye to eye on this team, sir.
No, I think that's awesome. One of the reasons why is because of the cost. He's going as QB 33, QB 34 right now.
And
So
that's
if you're in
still
a
too high.
if you're in a super flex league, you can get a starting quarterback with absolutely no competition for a song right now. In fact, I saw it a couple super flex leagues. He was available in free agency. That's how little everybody thinks of Baker Mayfield. I don't know. I think now that the expectations are so low for Baker, we do know that he's got some really good, wide receivers around him. Why not just put him on your roster? If it works out, you find out within 3 weeks he's not going to produce anything, you move on. I think I'll take the chance that on former number one pick becoming passable again.
Passable. That's not what I want from my number one, my
I know,
former
but
number one
it's
overall
just
pick.
it wasn't like Tom Brady was great last year and he still put up a ton of volume and he was still fantasy relevant. I just wonder, like, if Baker Mayfield could be, I think it's from all reports, he's healthy now. He likes this offense. Maybe he could be somebody who gives you 225 passing yards per game and a touchdown and a half. Who knows?
Do you have any idea how many times Baker Mayfield has had more than 30 points in a game?
Maybe once.
Never. He's never scored more than 30
Yeah, but those
fantasy.
offenses were holding him back, Kate.
I'm sure I named my dog Baker Mayfield, or I named my dog Baker after Baker Mayfield. Like he's scrappy, he's fun to watch.
Your dog or Baker?
Both
Oh,
actually.
okay.
Both. But like never finished ahead of QB 16. Like he's not he can scramble. I'll give him that, but like not a runner by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good enough passer. I'm so out on Baker Mayfield.
Oh, I'm out on Baker as a franchise quarterback. I'm just saying in terms of like if you need like QB2 production at a super cheap price, you can get Baker.
Like it for example, in this league that you saw like on waivers, that's not a thing. But last year, Marcus, like yes, not a good offense here, but Baker Mayfield averaged 11 fantasy points per game. Like
it's not great. It's not ideal. Again, I kind of like the situation for Baker because the expectations are so low and because there is talent around him. Like this is a really good wide receiver core. Like we didn't even mention some of the other options that they have, including Russell Gage, Cade Otton in year 2. I just won't be shocked if he becomes like in real life, like the 22nd best quarterback in the NFL this year. And that's going to have value. Like there's just nobody on this Tampa Bay roster that's going to threaten him at all for snaps. And if you can find a starting quarterback, for basically nothing, I'm interested.
And that is my approach for it. I'm just going to take that argument for Baker Mayfield and copy and paste it over to Rachaad White.
That's fair.
And and then we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, it's fair. This Tampa Bay offense is something else. All right, that is
Never
it
thought
for-
I'd get this rowdy over Tampa
Yeah,
Bay of
I
all
mean,
teams, but
I know. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for tuning in. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Again, every dayers. On Monday's show, Kate and I are going to be talking about the Cardinals. Somehow we managed to pick a worse franchise for Monday's show than Tampa Bay. I don't know how that was possible. But we'll be talking about some players that we want to buy, sell, and hold. So make sure you guys tune in for that. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. Check us out on YouTube. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I am at Marcus _Mosher. We will see you next time.